Hello, Sense of Things. It's Jeff here. Today, it's just going to be me. Ron is actually moving into his new home he's been moving over the last couple of weeks, and it's been a little crazy out there for him. I just decided to do a quick show today just to give you an update. It was relatively quiet week today. We are in the week prior to July 4th. So typically there's not a lot going on in the economy. It's the beginning of summer. People have started to take some time off and have been traveling a lot. And we've been talking about that on the show over the last several months about how, although people are pulling back in certain areas, they're certainly not pulling back in their travel. And we have definitely seen it with airports. Certainly we're seeing all kinds of issues up in the northern areas, the northern parts of the country with the Canadian fires. That's having an effect on air travel throughout the country. So a lot of those people that are traveling are not very happy at this point, trying to get back home and getting stuck. Today, like I said, it's the week before July 4th. So I wanted to start off really quick and just share with you some facts about July 4th that you may or may not know. First one is that the Declaration of Independence was not actually, it was not actually fully signed on July 4th, 1776. The Declaration was actually approved on July 2nd, 1776, and the full signing did not happen. Most of it didn't happen until August of that year because a lot of the delegates were away from Philadelphia at the time. During the holiday, over 150 million hot dogs are eaten on Independence Day. That is actually enough to stretch from DC to LA 5 times. One fact that I knew part of and I didn't know the other part of, actually 3 of our presidents have died on July 4th. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams both died on the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence on the exact same day, within hours of each other. And James Monroe died in 1836 on July 4th as well. Now, John Adams, who, if you know anything about him, and if you ever saw the thing about him that Paul Giamatti did on HBO, he was a little bit of a testy guy, and he always believed that American independence should be celebrated on July 2nd, as that was the actual day that the Continental Congress voted for independence in 1776. And because of that, he was always annoyed about it, and that it wasn't celebrated on July 2nd, and reportedly he turned down invitations for July 4th celebrations throughout his entire life. Now, Massachusetts, where he was from, became the first state to make the 4th of July an official state holiday in 1781. Another interesting thing is President Zachary Taylor, the first president that we had who died in office, died in 1850 after eating spoiled fruit at a July 4th celebration. So there's something about that whole July 4th thing. Macy's, which does one of the largest fireworks shows in the entire country in New York City, uses more than 75,000 fireworks shells, and it costs about $6 million a year. Now, Independence Day wasn't a federal holiday in this country until 1870. And here's an interesting fact. As of July 2016, July 4th was the #1 holiday for beer sales, according to the National Beer Wholesalers Association. This was an interesting one for me because I didn't think anybody ever was allowed to do this. But every July 4th, descendants of the signers of the Declaration of Independence get to tap the Liberty Bell 13 times to honor the original 13 colonies. Really cool. Last one I really wanted to share with you is another presidential fact about July 4th. President Calvin Coolidge, our 30th president, was born on July 4th, 1872. So really cool facts about July 4th. Getting into this week's economic news, first and foremost, this was the week where Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, spoke. He shared a little bit about his take on where the economy is at this point. I think what came out of the testimony had some immediate effect on the markets. We saw a little bit of a pullback on Tuesday and Wednesday, then a little bit of a turn positive on Wednesday. He stated that they're going to be vigilant. They're still going to keep focused on raising interest rates, and basically telegraphed that what Ron and I have been saying all along, it's very likely that they'll continue to raise interest rates throughout the rest of 2023. So the feeling that we're at the end and maybe the Fed will start cutting rates by the end of the year, I just don't see that happening. And it's one of those things that we just need to be cognizant of the fact that it's very likely that it's going to keep going. Really, the only news this week, or certainly the economic news that is affecting the markets a little bit. This morning, we got the second read of the second quarter GDP. So what happens with GDP is they do 3 separate reads on it of the previous quarter. So, we're in that second read at this point for the second quarter. We'll have our third read after the quarter end, and that'll be the final. It was interesting this morning. So the prior quarter over quarter was 1.3%. This time's consensus was basically in line with that, 1.4. However, the actual came in at 2.0, and personal consumption and expenditures was also up as well. That's significantly higher at 2 and 4.2. That just puts right in there in what we talked about with the Fed, that they still see inflation increasing, and it's very likely that they're just going to keep raising interest rates, which is going to have some effect as you see it roll down here as I talk about the next couple things. The next piece of the pie here was, and I'm going to share my screen real quick. This was jobless claims, which we'd said that's been ticking up. And what had happened prior, 264, prior revised was 265, so it went up. Consensus this time was 270,000, and we ended up well below the consensus range at 239. Initial claims were down 26,000. So that is saying that although we're starting to see layoffs, there's still an absorption in the market. So there's not as many jobless claims. So people are losing jobs, but they're also finding jobs relatively quickly, it seems. The last one I wanted to take a look at here is corporate profits, because I think this is the telling story. Prior corporate profits year over year down 6%. This one was down 5.1%. Something that you need to understand is, although we're seeing less layoffs, we're seeing GDP increase, gross domestic product increase. The challenge that we're having is the interest rates are starting to have some effect on the companies. And as the companies go, so does employment and everything else. So what I would say is we had potentially 2 good pieces of information. It depends on how you look at GDP. GDP continuing to grow is a good thing, that it's not declining massively. That tells us that our leading economic indicators, although I had said that they're indicating towards being in a recession, with GDP continuing to creep up, that tells me that we're not quite there yet. We're not seeing that. We're not in the recession that I thought we would be in at this point. Means it may go a little bit longer to recession period. The interesting part of all this is whether we're going to see a steep recession, or if we see just a mild recession and we eke our way out of it and it's a soft landing. That means to be said at this point. So we just need to keep an eye on it. We're going to keep vigilant. We'll be sharing this stuff with you every week. For those of you out there that are celebrating the 4th of July holiday, all I can say is thank God we live in a country where we can freely discuss information like this and share all of this with you. Thank you to all the people who have served our country that continue to give us that freedom every single day. certainly our police and fire and all the first responders who will be working this holiday while we're being stupid and drinking beer and lighting fireworks off. The important part with all of this is we need to say thank you to all those people. Be safe. Enjoy your 4th of July holiday. We will be back next week, both Ron and I, and we'll be kicking off the summer season, or the summer, getting into the slower summer months, and talking a little bit about what's going on. So thanks a lot for your time today. Have a great weekend.